if one life is better because of the life that you got to live, it's all worth it. If one person in your life is able to take, the next best step, one more breath, wake up the next morning and have one new day in front of them because of your life, it's all worth it. I think you start small and then you hope for big things. Those don't always happen, but you start small and you start to celebrate those small wins too.
Welcome to another episode of Stories That Move, brought to you from Draymond Studios. I'm Mason Geiger, here with my co-founder, Matt Duell.
Today, we're chatting with a guest who's no stranger to the spotlight, but shines brightest in his efforts off camera. Joining us is Ben Higgins, best known for his role on ABC's The Bachelor, but here today as the president and co-founder of Generous Coffee.
Ben wears many hats as a speaker, author, and advocate for social change. We'll explore his journey from reality TV star to a leader driving impact through social enterprises.
We'll discuss his early influences, the pivotal moments that guided his career path, and how he's using his platform for a greater good. It's going to be an inspiring conversation, sprinkled with a couple of never-before-shared stories from The Bachelor.
So let's get started and welcome Ben Higgins to Stories That Move.
All right, welcome back to Stories That Move, brought to you by Draymond Studios. I'm your host, Matt Duell. With me, as always, Mason Geiger. Mason, how are we doing today?
So good, so good. So excited for today's conversation with a good friend, and yeah.
Absolutely. This is going to be a fun one. So with us today, we have of The Bachelor fame, season 20 of The Bachelor, Ben Higgins, also co-host of the Almost Famous podcast, author of Alone in Plain Sight, president and co-founder of Generous Coffee, public speaker, golf pro, friend, Ben Higgins with us today. Ben, so good to have you.
You got one of those things right. I am a golf pro.
Yes.
In my mind. I tell people I go to bed every night thinking that I'm a pro, and I wake up every morning and realize it's not true. Hey, it's good to be with you guys.
Great to be with you. And this is cool because Mason, Ben, you guys went to high school together. So we're kind of going way back on this one.
Go way back. It was funny. I found some old TSPN intros the other day on YouTube that popped up on my feed. And I was like, man, I think that's where your video career really took off.
I've thought about that so often. So this was a show that our high school did for like the morning announcements. And it was a really cool opportunity if you think about it. The high school invested so much in kind of doing this on-air broadcast. And it took a lot of work to put this on every morning. And I remember going back and like really loving hosting it and like really having a good time with it and feeling very comfortable doing it. I'm sure if I watched it, it would be so cringy. But I do think it like played a big role in kind of my comfortability in front of a camera, and then also just my ability to try to communicate a message without like losing your words. I still do. But yeah, that's wild. I would love to go back and watch those.
That's so cool. Well, you'll be happy to know that we still partner with the high school program and Scott Green, who's now the digital media teacher. And the students come here once a year and do the news out of the studio. So we'll have to have you come back sometime and do some high school news updates for us.
I would love to. That would be a blast.
That is awesome.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Well, for our listeners who have been living under a rock and don't know who Ben is, originally from Winona Lake here in the area, Ben, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and just what you're up to in the world today.
Yeah, sure. So I am from Winona Lake. I grew up there. My parents still live there. It's still wildly and oddly enough like a place. I've been in Denver for 11 years, but when somebody asks me like, where's home? It still is all like my first thought is always Winona Lake. I have to remember that Denver is home and has been home for 11 years. And I think that's just like a common sentiment with people from that area. It will always feel like home at some level and with some unique way. But I do live in Denver now. I'm married. I have my first child. I guess I'm a part of that process, but my wife is pregnant. So she's
awesome.
Due in February with a little girl. We could not be more excited for that. That's obviously going to be a big life change and probably the biggest life change in my, that's ever happened to me. But I am working on a few cool projects, Generous being the one that I care about the most and that I spend the most of my time on. Generous is a coffee company out of Warsaw. Now we just opened up in May, and it was started 7 years ago, kind of with this random idea with a bunch of people from Warsaw that we could start a for-profit business, agree not to make money on it, and then donate 100% of the profits to nonprofits. And 7 years later, through a lot of dips and valleys and headaches and joys and everything that comes with, I think, starting a business, we still exist. And it's still functioning. And it's been a really cool way to create story and to get involved in cool organizations that are doing great things around the world. So that's a huge part of my life. I do also still work for iHeartRadio. So I've done that for, I just signed another contract. So I'm going to be 11 years with iHeartRadio by the time that contract is done, which is crazy.
Wow.
I started this whole thing back when we would call this is iHeart, right? Big company, should have everything at their disposal. When we started that show, I was calling my co-host on a cell phone and we were patching in third line iHeart to do the editing and recording of it. And we recorded it for a year and a half on cell phones. That is wild to think about, that time in life.
No kidding.
So that still exists. And then the thing, I have a couple cool small projects. The restaurants were something I got involved in way before The Bachelor. I kind of fell into it because I had no friends, and I bellied up at the same restaurant every night for dinner. And finally the guy was like, hey, do you want to help pay for this? You buy a lot of food here. You want to invest? And I said yes. And we've grown to 20 restaurants now over 8 years, which is crazy. So that takes up more and more time in kind of a fun, unique way. And right now that's kind of it. And it really, I think when I say it, it sounds like a lot, but the cool part is a lot of those things are pretty hands off for me at this point, other than Generous. And, so it really isn't. I just gotten to be involved in some really cool things.
So during that journey, and I guess back up a little bit into schooling, college, how did you ever think that this is what you would be doing and helping run and lead multiple companies and organizations? And what does this process and your journey look like?
Yeah, no, I think at some level I always wanted to have a seat at the table, and I was never very good at following directions. And so I always felt like my unique place in the world had to be maybe not in leadership, because I don't think I was capable or had the character or the values for a lot of my life to be in any leadership position. But I knew I was going to have a hard time kind of following along, working, for the man all the time. And I learned that right after college. I came out to Denver to work in finance, and I was a business analyst. And my soul was very sucked. I felt like a robot. I would show up to work every day, uninspired, kind of clocking in, clocking out. It felt like I was excited about time passing instead of enjoying the time I was in. I was really excited for 5 o'clock to hit every day. And I did that for 6 years of my life, and even after I was The Bachelor. And it was not a good season for me. And I learned then that I had to step it up in a lot of ways in my life so that I could get in a position where maybe I didn't have to clock in and clock out every day. I also think that I learned a lot, even some of my most formative years were definitely high school, for most people. But I had a very low level of self-esteem. And at some time, I still do also. But it's now, as I get older, I've, developed some ways of kind of combating that and speaking better things into myself. But athletics were a big part of my life. And then I got really hurt. I just totally destroyed my knee in a football game my junior year of high school. And so for something that was so athletics were my identity, for that to be stripped away from me, really caused me to ask myself, what is life about? Who am I outside of this? And it was a hard season of life for me with, a lot of addiction, a lot of really struggles with mental health, a lot of questions of, is this even worth it kind of questions coming in, a lot of questions on faith at that time too. the thing I'm most proud of myself for, and I think my friends and my family, was I got through that season. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick, but it was like this grind to kind of reform me into a better man, into a man that had to ask myself those questions. So, long story short, to answer your question, I think it was The Bachelor then that kind of gave me this boost that I needed at the perfect time. I have no doubt that there was some divine intervention at that point in my life. I think it's a weird thing to say is, hey, The Bachelor was a God-given gift for me. But I was so low that what The Bachelor did was it allowed me 3 months of my life away from cell phones, away from the world, to reflect, to think a lot, because there's very little distraction, to communicate my emotions, my feelings, my thoughts about myself. And then I came out of that, and I think I had some clarity on who I am, what I care about, what I'm about, what my passions are. And that launched me into a whole new, sphere after the show, where I was also just handed a platform and was allowed and kind of said, hey, use this platform for whatever you want. And for me, it was, well, let me take these things I've always cared about now and try to get more involved in them. And so that gave me a lot of confidence and has kind of still been the defining, reason that I'm doing what I'm doing today.
That's awesome. So one thing I heard you say is you still struggle with some of the self-esteem pieces. And I think maybe some people would hear that and go, wait a second. I mean, you're America's favorite bachelor. Like, how in the world could you, with your platform, struggle with those pieces?
I'm just king of the nerds. If I'm America's favorite bachelor, I'm king of a bunch of rejects and people that can't find love on their own. I don't know necessarily why I struggle with it. I hear that and I understand it. I think the thing we're learning today more than ever is that we have to not assume things about people or define people by what we think and see, because I think it takes a lot of work to get to know somebody. Once you get to know somebody, I think you get to learn more about what they're for and against and what they're struggling with, but also what they're excited about. I think there's multiple things in my life that have caused me to kind of question my worth, my value, what I can bring to the world, what I'm offering to the world. Those questions come up in my life very often. And then, quite honestly, I think starting your own business, as you two know, for as exciting as that is, and probably for as cool as that looks on the outside, it brings a lot more questions of, can I actually do this than, just working for somebody. The seasons that feel like failures, the seasons that feel like we're never going to see a brighter light at the end of the tunnel, those questions come up all the time when you're starting a business and you're running a business. And I think it oftentimes kind of, for whatever reason, it continues to remind me, maybe you're not good enough for this. Maybe you're not made for this. But I like I said, I think over time I've been able to develop some skills and some tools based from counseling and from life experience to continue to talk to myself in a more positive way, to tell myself, yeah, you're made for this. You can do this. And even if you can't, maybe this thing closes down on it. It doesn't mean that, you still don't have value. And I just had to learn that over time. Because I can't let myself continue to just dip down into the, dark nights of the soul every time something bad happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'd love to go back a little bit. So you're talking about the 6-year window. You're in Denver. You're working in finance, and then you, kind of a low point. Bachelor comes into play. In that kind of 6-year wilderness opportunity comes up. Yeah, did you have reservations about going on The Bachelor? Did you feel like, oh yeah, this is something I could do or I want to do? Like, how'd all that come about?
For as low self-esteem as I've always had, I've also had to combat a very big ego oftentimes in my life. And so I've always had a pretty big ego. And I've always, for whatever reason, thought like, you belong. I've always had this feeling of me belonging wherever that may be. And I was working in finance, like I was saying, in the basement of this office complex, and I was in this cubicle, And one day, the chief marketing officer, she came up to me and she said, "Hey, there are, I love the show The Bachelor." And I had watched it with my mom growing up, off and on. I think we caught like 4 total seasons in my life. And so I knew of it. I knew what it was about. I didn't ever, I'm a little slow. And so I didn't know that like normal people did it. Like I didn't realize that was something that like you just get picked off the street and all of a sudden you show up to a mansion and you're on a show. I never like processed that or thought about that. But she's like, there's casting calls in Denver, Colorado today. If I buy you lunch, would you go down and do the casting call? And I was like, I am not standing in line at a casting call for a dating show. That sounds like, I am pretty low in life. I'm not that way. And so she said, okay, second option. If you came up to my office, would you sit with me and we signed you up online? Would you go through the application process? And I said, I would. That sounds fine. So I did. And it wasn't 6 days later. But let me go back a little bit. What she said to me was she said, you're single, you're not dating. I didn't have any friends in Denver at this point. I kind of moved out here just for the job. She's like, you don't have any friends. You work all the time, because I wasn't great at my job. So I had to work more hours to just keep up with everybody else. And she goes, and I can tell you just don't like it. Like you don't like your job. She goes, so you need to try something different. Like you need to mix this up a bit. And she goes, so there's a casting call. That was kind of her preface. And I think for whatever reason, all those things were true and must have been very clear to the outside world. They all had to feel so bad for me. So I did the application, and 6 days later they called and they said, hey, can you come to LA in 2 months and kind of meet with us in person if you're still single at the time? And I was. And so I showed up to Los Angeles and went through this whole big casting process. I think there was 90 guys there. And it's like this different rooms where they kind of walk you through this process. They ask you a bunch of questions about yourself. And I left there. And it was another like 3 months later that I didn't hear from them. And then they called and they said, hey, in 2 weeks, would you show up to the mansion and be on The Bachelorette? And so I said yes to that. And I was so excited that for whatever reason, I just felt like I had gotten accepted into something. So I called up all my friends, all my family. My family was like, that's so wild. This is going to be so weird. And my friends, and I said it earlier, they're like, we'll see you like 2 weeks after the show starts. Like there's a lot of studs there, they said. And I was like, wait, that's cool. Like, yeah, maybe. Thanks. And they were right. There were a lot of studs there. Yeah. Thanks for the encouragement. But I said, I still started to question, kind of have buyer's remorse, I think, and question if it was the right thing for me. And so I sat down. I don't want to get too Christianese on everything because that's not really how I function, but there are seasons of life that does come up in my, for me. And it is a big part of my life. So I just said this prayer. I said, God, I'm not smart enough, nor do I have the foresight. I remember this prayer exactly to know if this is the right decision or not for me. So if it's not, just close one door. And those 3 doors that I said out loud were my friends, my family, or my work. I was not willing to leave my job because I was like, I have health insurance. I can't leave, get fired, and then try to come back and, survive. I cannot leave my job. And all 3 of those groups, said do it with open arms. My job was take a sabbatical for as long as you need. I don't think they knew that it was going to be 6 months because I became the Bachelor after that. Yeah. But they had agreed to it, so sorry for them. But all of them said go do it, shake it up a bit. And so I said yes and found myself in Los Angeles 2 months later or whatever, showing up to the mansion to date a girl with 30 other dudes.
Wow. So what was the timeline from The Bachelorette to then learning you were going to be the next Bachelor?
Well, the filming of The Bachelor always ends the week before Thanksgiving. So it's in end of November. Okay. And then The Bachelor starts filming its first episode always at the end of this month. So the end of September. So it's a pretty long process. Now, granted, The Bachelor is done filming and then it airs. That takes a couple months. I think that airs through August, maybe. And then August is over and you start filming The Bachelor. That will air then, 4 months later. So between filming, it's 7-8 months. And then Between airing of the show, it's about the same.
Okay.
I went back to work. I was typing user manuals for a software company in between.
Wow.
That's so wild. Because what was it like for you coming off of filming and you're going back into like normal life as people are just starting to watch it? And you almost have this like peek into the future.
Yeah, it's very weird. Well, you kind of do. I didn't really know what to expect. I wasn't an analyst of the show. I didn't know that 12 million people back then watched every season of that show. I didn't realize that 12 million people in the United States would all of a sudden have an interest in my life at some level, not only with like praise, but critiques. Again, I was a junior level analyst at a software company that no longer exists. So it was failing back then. It's now completely gone. So like, this wasn't an exciting world I was living in. And it was a very like quiet world. So I get off of filming and only a few people really knew I had done it. And so those people were curious and, asked me some questions like, what was it like? How'd it go? And you could only say so much. And then once it started airing, I really didn't have my moment, I guess, until like 4 or 5 weeks in. There was one episode where we went on a group date and it was we were teaching an elementary school class about sexual education, and all of us were given a topic that we had to teach. And it fit perfectly for me because in college, I was a sex ed minor. I had this idea that I was going to kind of teach sexual education within the church space and try to do it in a healthy and helpful way. So I had already gone to college for this. So I was like really well prepared, but I was just excited about the opportunity to do it. So I did it, and it was good. It was good compared to those other dudes. And I knew what I was talking about. And it blew up. It did. It like all of a sudden, one episode, one night, it was really quiet, just kind of this fun thing that some people would talk about. And then all of a sudden it was like madness in my life and a lot of people having an interest. And then that kind of obviously continued through the rest of the season. So it was a very weird time where you're like, I have just spent 3 months in this bubble traveling the world, dating this girl that's now airing on national television. I've lived this. I've experienced this. This is my real life.
Yeah.
But nobody else knows about it yet. And then once they started to, it was months later. So I always have to like relive these moments too. It's like watching family videos back, I think is what it felt like the most. Just family videos that people had a lot more of an interest in.
Yeah. So interesting. Did they as you take on an endeavor like this, do they set you up with like PR, like media training of like, hey, here's what to expect? Or is it you kind of go back and then as these episodes launch, then you're just getting hit with this onslaught of like people who are now interested in you and like trying to figure out how to manage all that on your own?
I don't know what they do today. I'm assuming today they have a little more support because of over the last few years, the show has ran into some pretty big controversies that have made contestants have to respond to things more than they did back then. No, back then there was nobody paying attention to me from that franchise. I mean, I think they care about the lead, and as the season continues, I think they start to care about the next lead a little bit. So as the season ended, I had a team around me at ABC and Warner Brothers that kind of backed me and supported me and walked me through it. But no, there was no help. You were kind of running your own race.
Wow. So for you, the choice to be the next lead, I mean, was that a slam dunk for you, or was that something that you just had to camp out for a little bit on?
It was pretty much a slam dunk. Let's be honest. Hey, you're 25 years old and you're going to show up and you're going to have 30 people come and try to date you. And right now you're still working, in a job you don't like. I was like, yeah, I'm in. It worked before, it worked now. And the question of, could I leave my job for this? Was a little easier to answer because they pay you to be the Bachelor. They don't pay you to be a contestant. The contestants, everything is on them. So for a Bachelor or a Bachelorette, it becomes your full-time job for a year. in a lot of ways. And so they compensate you accordingly. So it was a lot more than I was making in my software job. And so I was like, yeah, this is a pretty easy choice for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything out of that experience is, you know, obviously it's been a big part of your life. Anything you wish people knew about that experience, stuff that they don't see through the TV side of it. You're like, I wish people understood this part of it.
I think I've always wished that people realize how real it is. It is manipulated. You know, producers can play, you know, God at their own level. They see everything at all the times. They know who's arguing in the room and where you're walking into. Like, it is manipulated, but it is very real. And it's really difficult to walk through for everybody involved, right? Some people are leaving their jobs. You know, as the lead, you're breaking up with people every day for 40 days straight. That's awful. It crushes you. It opens you up to a ton of criticism because you're never going to do it right. So I've always wished, and I'm guilty for this too, you know, these are still very much real humans who are trying to function in this world. And most of them probably have a story of your rejection or have a reason that they're there and why they're wanting love so bad, wanting community so bad, and they haven't found it. And it's just wild. You're doing it for 3 months without any TV, any phone, any computer, any book. You're in this bubble, and you start to it like takes some time to get used to the world outside of it. Once you're done with it, because you get so used to this kind of living in this fake bubble for so long that when you get back to the real world, it moves so fast and you've lost touch with a lot. Especially in today's world where information and new things are happening all the time. So I think just giving some people some grace on entering back into the world and how they're doing it is probably helpful also.
So during that, during filming and you're in that bubble, it's like, can you just paint like just like a brief like picture of what that looks like? Like, what are you doing in between shoots and like what's your time going towards?
Yeah, I can give you a great picture. So I'm an only child. And I'm an introvert, who, you know, obviously loves to talk and loves to be social, but needs, and for me to do that, I need a lot of time away and alone. And so the show, when I was the Bachelor, hired on a handler to follow me everywhere I went. He slept in the same room as me, so they'd always get 2 beds. I would go to the bathroom and he would talk to me while I'm going to the bathroom. There was no hiding because they wanted me to emotionally break, and I did. Wow. In fact, a story that people don't know, I don't think I've ever said it. I tried to unsuccessfully punch through a car window during filming because I was so mad at one point as the season got longer. I walked out of a date and I was mad at the producers for what they did, and I was arguing with them, and I tried to punch through a car window. It didn't work. The car window did not break. So that was fun for me. So you start to lose it, honestly. Like, I'm not a violent human. I've never been in a fight in my life, nor do I want to or have any plan to. So you start to lose it a little bit. You wake up. So the normal day is wake up at 7 a.m. is your call. 7:45 is when you leave wherever you're staying to start the date. So that probably means that you're going to see the women, you're telling them about the date, or you're showing up to location for the date. Whoever you're going on a date with either leaves with you from the house that they're at, or they meet you at the date. And you kind of have that date starts around 10 then. So you're getting set up with mics, you know, they're getting everything situated, you know, it's very much a television show at that point. And then you just have this kind of fun date that usually lasts till about 12:30. You break for lunch, and you split off typically for lunch. And so the girl goes one way, you go the other way. If it's a group date, same situation. Girls go someplace, you go another place. You eat lunch for about an hour and a half, and then you show back up for like an afternoon portion, which usually leads into an evening date, like a cocktail party. That ends for the lead usually I think we had to close down because it's 12-hour shift, 10-hour shift. So we had to close down around 1:30 a.m. So you're in bed about 2 o'clock and back up at 7 for it all over again.
Wow.
And you do that for 40 days straight. It is awful. Well, a few years ago when I was single, I've been married now for a while, but when I was single. I don't know what season this was. They asked me to come back because I was single at the time. The relationship from the show had just ended. They're like, would you come back and be the Bachelor again? And I think I was 30. So that must have been 5 years ago, maybe 29. I was like, for no other reason, I just couldn't do it. Like that schedule's so brutal. I can't imagine walking through that again or even getting psyched up to do it again. It's a long, hard, emotional experience from start to finish.
Wow.
In going through that experience, like what was the biggest learning you found about yourself during that struggle?
Well, I got known from the Bachelorette in this moment that I think may be the Bachelor. There's probably 8 guys left at that time. We were in Ireland, and one of the producers comes up to me and he goes, I don't like you. And that is probably the thing you could say to me. One, I respect it if somebody were to say that, because I feel like so oftentimes I just wonder if everybody hates me or not. At least he said it, but it also like destroyed me inside. And I said, I responded with, why don't you like me? He goes, because you don't let me get to know you. You hide out when things are difficult and you speak up when things are easy. You never I've never gotten to know you. And so I kind of like sat on that, and he goes, how about you and I go and talk? And that's what they call an ITM, in the moment, where you see like your face and there's a producer behind the camera, you're lit up looking all pretty and beautiful. And we go in there and he turns on the camera and he turns on the lights. And we did this thing for 3 hours. We just talked.
Wow.
This guy's name's Alon Gale. He's now doing horror films. He was a Bachelor producer. Now he's doing horror films. Alon and I could not be more different in life, right? He does not have a face tradition. He is incredibly intelligent. He's really creative. We were very different human beings with very different interests. But what happened was, in this conversation that I had with him, he was brilliant in navigating and making me feel like I was actually just talking to a friend. And at the end of that interview, what I admitted to him, which was true to me, I'd never said it out loud, was I feel unlovable. Or what I think I meant was I feel unlikable. I feel like the more people get to know me, the less they like me. And so as a result, I do. I say the right thing at the right moment. I hide when moments are hard. So I said this, and then he's like, you need to tell the Bachelorette this. It's like, all right, well, okay. I know what you're doing, but that's fair because it's true. And it was this like kind of like breath of fresh air when I said it. I don't think I'd ever been so vulnerable in my life. I think I'd hid so much in. So I say it to Caitlin, the Bachelorette, and it airs on national television. So I tell her I feel unlovable, and I explain why. And the response from the audience was incredible. Thousands upon thousands of messages of like, me too. I've always felt this way. I've never been able to put words to this. Like something I was probably most scared of airing actually became the thing that like was the best place for me, which again, as I said, is now why I spend so much time in my life trying to care for the outsider or trying to get involved in projects that are, allowing people to be a little more vulnerable, allowing places to speak from. That's why I wrote my book, Alone in Plain Sight. All that one moment defined so much of the next few years of my life, because it was true to me, but I think it's true to most. And so it was my tagline. Kind of going through then the rest of the process was this guy that feels unlovable. Can he find love? Just to let you know, I did later on in life. I did not through the show. Yeah. But yeah, it was definitely I forget your question at this point, but I think it was something around like the most like defining moment or one of the biggest moments like that. That was 100% it. It always will be. It changed everything for me. And it only happened because I had somebody whose job it was to care. But I just went to his wedding last week. He's cared since then too, to just tell me really what he felt about me, and then not just give up on that. Actually, like, say, I don't like you, but I want to, but I don't like you because you don't let me get to know you. And that was a really cool moment for me to be able to explain myself and talk through it with him. But it also has been kind of a lesson learned in my life of, hey, if I don't like somebody, doesn't mean I'm just giving up on them. Let me give them the space to maybe talk it through with me. There's been some really beautiful moments since then for me.
That's awesome. That's so good. So going through that experience, coming out on the other side of the show, you talked about realizing I have this platform and looking for ways to use that. Talk to us how Generous came to be just through that moment for you.
Yeah, so a couple cool things happened. In Warsaw, when I was younger, I went to a church called Warsaw Community Church. And Warsaw Community Church used to go to Honduras every year. And my family took me to Honduras when I was in middle school. And the organization we went with is a really great organization. I don't have any negative feelings towards them. But their identity was in disaster relief. And so they got involved in Honduras based after Hurricane Mitch. And what they found was like there was a pretty big demand for continuing to go to Honduras on trips, which for nonprofits is really important. It gets people involved. It gets them to see the mission. It's good for fundraising. And it's just good for humans to go and experience different cultures, different people, different ways of life. However, I would argue today, and the founder of that organization, I have a lot of respect for. I would just argue they were meant for disaster relief, which looks a lot different than sustainable change and community development. Those two things in the nonprofit space are hard to kind of align and both do well at the same time. And back in the 90s and early 2000s, the way Americans viewed missions work and humanitarian aid is a lot different than we do today. There was a lot less access to information, and so it was a lot more like these people are projects, kind of.
Yeah.
We're going to go down and show them what they need and what they want, and we're going to help them get it. And it was very unsuccessful, but nobody understood why. Like, why aren't they adopting this new clean water program that we have available to them? Well, the reason was they had no empowerment in it. They had no ownership in it. They don't want to be treated like projects. Like, these are real humans, and they're very intelligent, and they function very well in the worlds that they live in. So anyways, I came back from this trip to Honduras. Not only was my heart broken, I was inspired, but I was also really mad because I was mad at God, and I was mad at the trip for making me go down there and see this thing that then I was coming back to my world in the United States, and I had no ability to really care and help. And then like maybe next year I went back to Honduras and gave them a food box and said, hey, good luck for the next month. It felt empty to me. It just made me angry. And so, but it was a righteous anger, I think. So anyways, the couple of guys on the trip that I was on came back, and they came up with this idea for a nonprofit. It's now called Humanity and Hope United. And Humanity and Hope United's idea was, what if we went into these communities and instead of telling what they need, what they want, what if we asked them, what do you need? What do you want? What do you dream of? And then how can we help? And that was and that's how we guided the strategy. That's how we fundraised. That's how we picked the projects and the communities that we involved in. So this gets started. This idea for Humanity and Hope gets started. And it was super successful. Like, relationships were built, friendships were built. The programs that were going into these communities were being owned by the communities. They were being supported by the communities. It was an incredible thing to see. The problem was we were like in our early 20s and fundraising was impossible. We didn't have any money. None of our friends had any money. And our families were sick and tired of us calling them saying, can we get another $100? Because we really want to build a chicken farm. So the Bachelor happened. And Humanity and Hope was still something I was very involved in, and I was passionate about. And I get off the show, and obviously I go back to my job at the software company. At that point, too, I had started working for iHeartRadio. And iHeartRadio was starting to pay me a salary that was, I guess, it allowed me the consideration of leaving the finance job. But it was only taking up about 6 hours a week because I was just the host of 2 shows. And so I was just recording, I was getting all the notes sent to me, and then I was done. And I was like, I can't be just a host for 6 hours a week forever. Like I need something else to do. And I met with one of my buddies, Riley Fuller, and I started to tell him kind of my thoughts and, where I was at in life. And I said, I'm going to miss working in business. I really love working in a business, and I really love the idea of business. And I really want to see, I want to see a business grow. And we kind of talked it through and said, what if we started a for-profit business that sold a product? At that point, we had no clue, but we knew we wanted to be more in the e-commerce space or retail space. And we donated 100% of the profits to nonprofits, because what was happening at that time was Riley was running Humanity and Hope United. I was working for iHeart. I didn't necessarily need any more money, or I didn't need to get paid. And I knew I wasn't going to be getting paid initially anyways. And so we had this crazy idea of, what if we find a couple people in Warsaw, or people that we know who have maybe made it early in life, or maybe maybe they're retired and they're just looking for a next chapter. And we sell them on this idea that we're going to build a business that gives back to nonprofits, that becomes a sustainable fundraising source for these nonprofits that are having a hard time fundraising on their own, specifically Humanity and Hope United. And we get their buy-in to invest into it, knowing that the return is not going to be financial, but it's going to be the storytelling and the involvement. And so we started calling people that we knew that fit that category, and we got a couple people involved, Drew Scholl being one of those. And so we started Generous. We fell into coffee because we were at dinner one night, and a random guy that we were at dinner with was like, I got a coffee farm. You want to come see it tomorrow? And we're like, yeah. We went to see it. We're like, we love coffee. We just love there's so much beauty to it. There's a lot of storytelling to it. The people producing the coffee are absolutely incredible. So we said, let's just go back and sell coffee. I don't know. So we got on my social media and said, if this is the idea that we have, and if anybody wants to buy this coffee, let us know. And in a month, we'll get it to you, because we didn't have any coffee at the time. So we bootstrapped it, and we sold something we didn't have. And we went down and found a bunch of coffee, brought it back to the U.S., packaged it in my garage, and shipped it off to all these people. And that's kind of how we started. That's how we got the capital to start. Riley and Drew are still very much part of the legacy of Generous. They're no longer involved because Drew had another job. He was, at the time, pretty high up at Wildman. Riley still works for Humanity and Hope United. And so then I kind of took it off on my own for a year and a half, and then called up Tyler Silvius, who was a CEO in his 30s at Silvius Insurance and was living in Spain with his family at the time. And I said, hey, do you want to come back and work for free? And it's probably going to cost you some money to keep this thing going. And he goes, yeah, that sounds perfect. And he comes back and he moved back to the United States. And Tyler and I have been running Generous together now for the last 3.5 years. And it's been a really fun season. And so Drew and Riley have a huge part in the founding of it. And then I really have to give Tyler the credit for how it's moved forward since then. But that's really wild. I guess, in short, I just really gave you a long answer to saying we wanted to start a company that helped nonprofits fundraise. And this was our way of doing it.
That's awesome. That's so good. What are some of the results you've seen as going into that? How have you seen it grow? How have you seen it support some of the nonprofits? How has it gone in ways that you didn't expect?
There's been many seasons of that. I think, there's been, I don't want to shy away from the fact there's been many really hard seasons of feeling like we weren't going to be able to keep the doors open because of our lack of volume of sales or lack of exposure, or probably entering into a space so saturated. Coffee is on every street corner, so it's really hard. Initially we thought we could get into a lot of households. We no longer really think that way. Right now it's a lot more wholesale accounts, it's gifting, it's promo, it's working with, nonprofits and maybe creating fundraising campaigns for them. To date, after this quarter, we're going to be able to say that we've donated over $250,000 to nonprofits, which is pretty crazy in 7 years, especially for a business that hasn't been profitable for all those 7 years. and has actually very few quarters of being profitable. But that's what you get when you donate your profits, I guess. But $250,000 in nonprofits, partnered with over 35 nonprofits, seen, our kind of brand get enhanced so that nonprofits are reaching out to us, maybe with clean water projects or with helping education and like school systems on depression and loneliness. We were really a part of a really cool campaign where we were able to donate money so that kids whose parents were incarcerated could get gifts for the holidays. Like a lot of those things. I think we're kind of like just a conduit to a story that's created after us, which is really fun. And we have to kind of be okay with that. And then now I think we're in probably the most fun season of Generous. With the shop opening up in Warsaw, business has really grown over the last few months. I think having a storefront and having a place that people can come into, it's pretty wild. I think for us, we always thought we told our story to exhaustion. And now having this building, people are coming in every day from the community that we all live in going, I never knew you guys existed. What's your story? And so it's cool to now have that because I think it gets people some more buy-in. It gives us some legitimacy. We have a really incredible team there. I think what that team represents and what we hope it represents is always a very welcoming space for everybody. It's really close to the jail in Warsaw. And so the hope has always been like the mayor of Warsaw would be sitting in there having a coffee alongside of somebody that just got out of jail the night before. And that they would be sitting in the same space because those spaces don't really exist easily in the world. And it's been this really fun chapter where, we have this incredible team that is welcoming, that is telling the story, that is bringing people in and, are motivated by something greater than money. And I think that might be unique to the community also. I think in Warsaw it is. I don't think anybody doesn't want to make money. I think that's a really fine and good thing. I don't want to ever guilt somebody, but I think having a motivation behind that too, that's like, I'm doing something greater for the world. This is something bigger than me is also a really good additive. And I think everybody that works there feels that way too. So not only do they want to provide for their families and provide for themselves and, have a good time doing it, that's great. Yeah. But they also, at the end of the day, are really doing it because they're like, this is something good. Yeah. And that, I think, is the ethos of what Generous represents.
No, I love that. And full disclosure for our listeners. So my wife, Erica, helps run the shop, the retail shop. And so I've gotten to see. She
does run the shop. Let's just be clear.
Yes. And
yeah, she does.
So just the last few months of seeing the shop open, as I've been there and connected with her, coming in again from us running a business, it's like, hey, so Erica, how do they make the money here? And it's like, they don't. It's not, that's not the point. And, just kind of digging into that. And again, seeing your posture, you and Tyler, and the way that you have positioned this to say, hey, we truly are about being generous. And our desire is to open up this facility and just have people come in, like you said, the mayor and someone who's got out of jail, local business people, local people off the street. There's a guy named Tom. He comes in every Saturday, he wheels in on his wheelchair, and he comes and he gets a free cup of coffee and sits and talks to Erica and the team. And there's just this beautiful just openness and generosity that's happening there every single week. And I love it. I love that it's in our community. So really, really grateful for your desire to do that. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful space, like what you guys have created there. It's incredible.
Yeah, and it's really, I live in Denver, and so the idea of Generous has always been a part of, my world, at least for the last 7 years. But the space itself, I think, is really fun and cool to see because it's not created by any demand or vision that I've had or that really even Tyler's had. It's been created by the Ericas and the Bests and the Morgans and the all these people who have invested time into that space are making it represent them too. And I think that can only happen in unique places in the world. And I think, as I said, Kosciuszko County in general has a lot of people that not only could get behind the story of Generous, but hear about Generous and go, I want to make it a part of my life too. And I think that is one of the cool parts about if you walk into the shop. It is not this playbook of that I've created 7 years ago about what this place could look like. No, that place is created by the people that are in there right now. And it is beautiful. Like, it is absolutely gorgeous to see what happens there on a daily basis. And I think sometimes it takes a step back to look at it and be like, yeah, we have people who are living on the streets. We have people who just got out of jail. We have the school board meeting all in one place and getting along and talking about everybody's life. Like, that is so cool. And it's done in a respectful way. It's done in a way that lifts everybody up. And that for me is just so fun to see. I think it represents the church really well in general. Like, I think it represents community really well, of what a community can look like. And so, again, I want to be clear. I don't think that concept stands out and works everywhere. I think it really works in that town. Like, it just seems like it fits because there's so many people that can get behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing. So, Ben, for our listeners, people who are listening in right now who say like, hey, I'm not a Ben Higgins. I don't have the kind of platform he has, TV shows, podcasts, all of those things. What would you say to them about how they can use their life, their influence, no matter where they're at, to lean in and to make a difference in the lives of others?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just taking a step. I was back home in July, and I heard a talk given about how to build community in a place that you're unfamiliar with. And the general consensus was, well, just get involved in any way you can. And I think, the platform for me has been a great gift, but it's useless unless it's used for something greater than myself. And I think that same, like, all of us have a platform because we have breath at some level. And we have this unique ability to be on this earth. And I think there is a lot to that we take for granted, and that, we get one shot at this thing. And so my hope always is just take the next best step. We have this saying at Generous that we used to have to say all the time when the employees working for us were really making no money. We were grinding to keep payroll open. And then we were also donating all this money away. And one day we had this team meeting, and one of the team members goes, I'm feeling very unmotivated because we donate this money away, but we never get to see any of the results. So we're just like a check writer. It feels very empty. And we kind of talked through this on the call, and what we came up with was this. And I think this is a saying that stuck with me for my life since then. And I think it's something that everybody should hear. So my first point was get involved. My second point is, if one life is better because of the work or the time that we invested into it. If one life is better because of the work that we do at Generous, if one life is better because of the work that you do at Dream On, if one life is better, it's all been worth it. Like, that's the value we put into human beings and the value we put into this beautiful, place that we get to live. Now, I would like to say that many lives have been bettered because of Generous. Many lives have been bettered because of Dream On. But if one life, it's all been worth it. And so I take that to say, if anybody's listening, if one life is better because of the life that you got to live, it's all worth it. If one person in your life is able to take, the next best step, one more breath, wake up the next morning, and have one new day in front of them because of your life, it's all worth it. And that's, I think you start small and then you hope for big things. Those don't always happen, but you start small and you start to celebrate those small wins too.
Awesome.
Love that. So powerful. And when I think about taking that next step, the moment that stood out to me as you're telling your story is that, like, you're selling coffee that you didn't even have yet. But it was like that you came back, you're like, hey, we don't have this figured out yet, but we're going to send it out like, hey, who wants coffee? And then we'll figure it out. But it was like, that was kind of like the pivotal step of like, we're going to do this and commit to it and see what happens.
Yeah.
I love that.
So good. So good.
We took in orders on social media and then typed them into an Excel spreadsheet and shipped them out that way. We didn't even have like a payment processing. We had to collect payment afterwards. It was great. Yeah. Don't take lessons from me on how to run a business. It's not pretty.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Ben, you've been so generous with your time. We appreciate it so much. For our listeners that want to just connect more with the work that you're doing, some of the things you're up to, some of the things, ways to connect with Generous, what's the best way for them to do that?
Really, I have a website called thebenhiggins.com. BenHiggins.com was taken, so don't read into that too much. I do have an ego. It's not that big. But that website gets updated kind of with speaking engagements that I'm doing. Also, stopping into the shop in Indiana, if you're ever around Warsaw or you're ever coming through, I think stopping in and just grabbing a free cup of coffee and, talking to the people that work in there and hearing the story is always really meaningful to me. I mostly keep up on my Instagram. That's kind of where I do most of my life updates. I'm not great at it. It's not really the place that I'm thriving at. So you could probably follow my wife and get better updates on my life through her social media. But I think for me, the ways that would mean the most would be, going to generouscoffee.com and reading about the story. And then I think the second way of doing that would be picking up the book, Alone in Plain Sight. It's probably, I need people to start doing it sooner or they're going to stop printing it. And so you can probably still go to Barnes & Noble and find it. If not, it's probably on a resale website somewhere. But reading that for me is really meaningful because it tells my story along with the story of 6 other people who've had seasons of life or are in seasons of life where they're learning something really powerful, or they have had circumstances happen that have kind of made them learn things that are very powerful. And for me, I just want to get their stories out there along with my story because I think it would help people make a little more sense of who I am and who they are. And then my hope is at the end of the book, they close it and just feel a little less alone. So Alone in Plain Sight would probably be the best way to, understand my story.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah. Very cool. Well, we will provide links to those things in the show notes. Again, Ben, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for who you are, the way you live your life, the generous posture you have, the difference you're making, not only in our community, but communities around the world. And we really appreciate you so very much.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome. It's fun to talk to people who I know so well and who are doing such cool things. So this was fun.
Awesome. Well, to all of our listeners, thank you for listening and watching along today, and we will see you next time on Stories That Move. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Stories That Move, brought to you by Dream On Studios.
Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode. And remember, if you or your organization have a story you're eager to share with the world, Dream On Studios is here to bring that story to life.
Don't hesitate to reach out. You can find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or visit our website at dreamonstudios.io. We understand how overwhelming it can be trying to bring your vision and story to life, but that's why we exist. And we've walked alongside hundreds of clients doing that very thing.
Yeah. We believe every story has the potential to inspire, to move, and to make a difference. Let's make yours heard.
Until next time, keep moving forward and keep telling those stories that matter.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time on Stories That Move.